She's a fashion blogger, model, and entrepreneur.
She's amazing.
The latest tips on fashion, beauty, wellness, travel, and her lifestyle. And now, here's the founder and creator of Not Basic Blonde, Olasha.
Hi, Carrie. So glad to have you on my podcast. How are you today? Welcome back.
I'm good. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, I'm so excited as well. And of course, congratulations on your new book. And your last book made a huge impression and got a lot of feedback. And this one, we would love to even learn more. What inspired you to write it?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this book. It means a lot to me because it's about my journey with mental health. So, the previous book, I talk about my journey to find love, and the book ends with how I found self-love, which is very closely tied into my anxiety journey. And this book really takes that idea of self-love and how that relates to mental health and expands upon it. So I decided to write this book because there really is a gap in mental health education out there right now. You're not really learning about anxiety and OCD and all these mental health disorders in schools and in universities. And you're especially not hearing about it from the younger generation. I'm 22 and I don't see anyone my age really being open and specifically talking about their struggles with mental health. So I decided that I wanted to fill that void and release my own mental health story through my new book, which is Mindfire, Confessions of an Anxious 20-something. And the book is not only memoir style, where I talk about my personal experience with anxiety, but there are actually real therapists who give therapy definitions inside the book of mental health terms. So, what is OCD? What is an intrusive thought? These terms that you may have heard floating around, but you don't necessarily have a clear-cut definition for because we didn't learn about it in schools. And each chapter is dedicated to a different emotion you go through when you're experiencing anxiety and going through your own mental health struggles, whether that's loneliness, restlessness, and eventually those emotions turn positive and you see growth and progress. So I'm really excited about this book because it's important. All of us go through our own mental health struggles in one way or another. And I think this could really open the floor for some important conversations.
That's incredible. And mental health is everything. I struggled with mental health before and where I went through anxiety and panic attacks like 3 times a day. And when you're going through something like that, you definitely can't work, you can't think, you can't even you barely living. It's like so hard to even live when you struggle with mental health issues. And mine came out of nowhere. I had anxiety and it was just randomly, it started randomly, I guess, piled up over years or just the traumas I went through. But it was such a crazy time that I had to overcome it. And I never knew what depression is because I'm not a depressed person ever. And but anxiety, I guess, identified as depression here. So it's like you never know it. You don't even ever feel it till you actually experience it because sometimes people say, "Oh, what's depression? Oh, you depressed? Just find something to do." You can't really
It's so
do anything.
misunderstood. It's
Yeah,
so misunderstood. Depression isn't sadness. Anxiety is not stress. You have to make those important distinctions. And one of the most important distinctions, which you touched upon, is anxiety doesn't necessarily have a clear indicator as what caused it. Oftentimes, it just pops out of nowhere with no explanation because you're just hardwired for anxiety. And it's okay to just admit that to yourself. Yes, I have anxiety. It wasn't caused by XYZ. I'm eating, sleeping, breathing as a human, and that's enough of a reason to have anxiety, and that's okay.
yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, it does come out of nowhere, and sometimes you even cannot even make sense in your mind.
Mhm.
Okay, everything is fine, nothing is going on. Why do I have this? Like, what's going on? And
Exactly.
your personal journey, how you went through anxiety and all of this, um, how did it shape your perspective on adulthood?
I think Well, first of all, I was class of 2020, so I did not have a prom or a graduation or anything like that. So my entire generation, Gen Z, really was suffering during the pandemic. And I believe I always had showed symptoms of OCD from a young age. When I was 8 years old, everything had to be even on both sides. So if I touched something with my right hand, I had to touch it with my left hand. So I had showed symptoms from an early age, kind of grew out of that, and my OCD symptoms reemerged during the pandemic because we were at home and with nothing going on in the world, all I had to do was sit on my bed and look inward and start ruminating on different things and, having these anxious habits that I wasn't necessarily used to. So that's, I think, how my anxiety started to manifest into adulthood. I did have a clear trigger in that instance, which was the pandemic and everything that my generation was going through. And, as you grow into adulthood, these are serious issues that we deal with. And as you mentioned, it's not necessarily always going to have a clear trigger. For example, maybe some people experience anxiety because they're having job stress or because they have a lot of homework or something. A lot of the times, just living as a 22-year-old girl is hard. And being human is hard, no matter what age we are. And we experience anxiety as we're adulting. I think these important themes we go through as we're adulting, like experiencing grief for the first time, experiencing heartbreak, these are themes that are heavy and adults, in air quotes, and may cause anxiety. And it's okay to acknowledge that and important to acknowledge that in order to accept your anxiety for what it is and to move forward with your life.
Yeah, so true. And I had to go through a lot of therapy and to learn how to cope with it and to recognize it, to admit it, and thinking that, okay, I'm not going crazy. It's just normal. It happens
You're
because,
not going crazy.
yeah, otherwise, like things that, I came to the point where I couldn't eat and I could not eat because I was afraid I was going to choke. It did not make any sense in my life. I've been eating since I was, of course, like we eat the whole life. It's like natural, you know,
Yeah,
logical
absolutely.
action. And out of nowhere, that started happening to me. It was disaster. But
Mm.
with
It's debilitating. It really is. And a lot of the times, that's the type of anxiety we don't see. We see anxiety in society and we just think it's the stress we experience before a test or before completing a huge assignment at work. We don't see the anxiety that's debilitating, like you mentioned, where you can't eat, you're so nauseous, you feel like you're going to choke. Anxiety is not based in logic, and that's a really important distinction to make. Oftentimes, when you're feeling stressed out, it's because there's a logical thing you're worried about. For example, not, I don't know, choking on stage if you're a singer and worrying you're going to forget your lyrics on stage. That's a logical thing that might happen. But worrying that you're going to slip and fall on the stage and that someone's going to shoot you and I don't know, something crazy that's going to happen. That's not necessarily logical. And that's where you make the important distinction and draw the line between what is anxiety and what is stress.
your book includes intimate like diaries. And when you were writing those, how did you process those emotions and how was it like and what was it like revisiting them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely difficult to revisit some of those tougher emotions, especially when it's something as intimate as anxiety and OCD. I actually wrote a lot of these stories and diary entries over the past 5 years, where my anxiety has really been kind of at the forefront of my life in my adulting era. So I'm lucky that I had written them down before and I didn't have to start from scratch and like really dig within the depths of my mind to remember what I went through. But still, I was revisiting these stories, and obviously it was difficult. But, I'm human. I have a therapist. I talk to my therapist. I make sure that I'm processing things in a healthy way. I have fitness in my life, and that's a huge way that I cope with my anxiety. But ultimately, my driving force in this book was to impact others. I'm not trying to reassure people that this is anxiety and what you're feeling is anxiety. Reassurance is not as powerful as the relatability that people are going to get from this book. I'm not trying to reassure these people that their thoughts aren't real or their intrusive thoughts are false, because deep down they already know that. I'm trying to show these people that there are other people going through it and it's okay to feel these feelings and not push them down and respond with logic all the time.
I love that. I'm sure it was really hard for you emotionally to even share that because when you get vulnerable, it's really hard to put it all on paper. You might think that, but then you actually share it with the world and other people reading it. And
hmm Exactly. There's one chapter where I mention losing my virginity. I'm actually running this chapter in Cosmo. By the time this comes out, it'll already be in Cosmo. But I'm very excited because obviously Cosmo is all about like sex and relationships, but you don't see a lot of girls talking about losing their virginity and like giving those authentic stories. And a lot of the times it's not as perfect as we imagine. It's very, very anxiety inducing. And this was a key chapter to put in my book because, as someone who suffers from anxiety and OCD every day anyway, I lost my virginity to someone and then he got up and left and never talked to me again. The anxiety that that caused me was unlike anything else I'd ever experienced before. The ruminating thoughts about me not being good enough, me being too ugly for this guy, me feeling like I'm never going to find love again. I mean, I'm hardwired for anxiety in the first place, and going through this important step in adulting, which is experiencing sex for the first time, is important to talk about. So I'd say that was probably one of the hardest things to confront, just because that is the definition of like getting intimate. And I'm like being so open about it with people. But like I said, it's so important to talk about these things that aren't being talked about in order to make a true difference in the mental health space.
well, I admire you for sharing this because it's very like private part, and of course it took a lot of courage to share that. So by you sharing it shows that you're a very strong person and very like inspiring to others because other girls can relate to it and they feel they're not alone.
Exactly. I think this story in particular, my previous book, my real life rom-com, was all about the specifics of my dating stories and getting into the nitty-gritty down to what he said and what I did and the shirt color he was wearing, like almost read like a fictional book. This is a book about mental health and emotions and feelings. So, in this story in particular, I'm not necessarily recounting every word that was said in that situation and what he was wearing and what I was doing and where I touched him or where he touched me. None of that in this book. This is about emotions at the forefront of everything. How was I feeling going into it, in the moment, and after? I think that's what people are going to resonate primarily with.
That's incredible. You also share different coping mechanisms in the book and which ones helped you the most and which ones are the most effective, you think?
I mention a lot of them in the book, and I think I mentioned some already in this podcast, but I'm a big runner. I love fitness. I think movement is medicine. Self-care is the best form of therapy. So you need to practice self-care in whatever way nourishes your body the most, which for me is fitness. So running is a huge one for me. Writing, I always like to say there's a quote from Hamilton. I wrote my way out. Once I started writing about my anxiety, that's when I really started to heal from within. Because not only was I getting my emotions out there, but I was also reuniting with this deep passion that I've had for writing since I was a kid. So for a lot of people out there, that could be their job, whatever their job might be. I use the example of a singer. It could be singing more, dancing, like doing something to fuel your body, podcasting, like do whatever makes you happy. And that's, I think, the primary form of self-care you should be focusing on. Also, therapy. I know we talk about it a lot in society. Everyone preaches, mental health matters. Go see a therapist. Therapy is so good. But like seriously, for someone who is diagnosed with a mental health disorder, it really helps to talk to someone who is unbiased. It's different from talking to a friend who obviously knows you and loves you and will give their opinions. But a therapist is like having a person there who is unbiased, who will just ask questions to cause inner reflection. That's completely different from talking to a friend or family member. So, self-care, fitness, therapy. I'm not a big meditation girly, but I know a lot of people love meditation. I mentioned it in my book. The form of meditation I like is almost visualization. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you're feeling anxiety, it really helps to kind of imagine your anxiety as something tangible, like fire or something, and then like close your eyes and like put out the fire with a fire extinguisher, or as like a little ball, and you like take the ball and you walk it to the back of your brain and you like put it in a chair. So almost like creating a scenario for yourself. That's a form of meditation, I think. But I don't know, I'm not a yogi or anything, but that's what I do.
As far as visualizing things, I've
Yeah.
done like they told me in my therapy, like
Yeah.
picture the place, what makes you happy, or just like imagine something relaxing. So I just like would take myself to the beach and
Yeah.
just imagine I'm there. And also, as far as you mentioned fitness is huge.
Yeah.
Before I ever experienced anxiety, I was like, I can work out today, maybe not. I don't have time for this. Well, now I'm like on it. Like it's a part of my routine, it's a part of my schedule. Like I actually schedule my workouts, like they're on my calendar because otherwise, like I take it seriously now
I
because
love that. Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely scheduling it into your routine as if it's a
yeah,
work appointment is
yeah.
important. I don't go a day without doing something to move my body, even if it's a walk or a 5-minute ab workout, just something to get your body moving and boost those endorphins. I've also done sauna lately, which is a new one for me. Do you do sauna at all?
I do sauna. I don't really do cold plunges, it's too much for me, but I do
Yeah.
sauna.
Full
And I
plunge
do,
is a lot.
yeah, I do walk into a lot, like 6 miles, and Pilates and yoga and HIIT classes sometimes. So,
Amazing. Sauna is great. That's a new
yeah.
one for me that I've kind of discovered over the past 2 years or so. I feel like sauna has so many benefits just from the inside out. I don't know what it does to you. I'm not a scientist or, a researcher, but something happens where I walk out of that sauna and I just feel lifted, almost like a divine presence has like lifted me. It's crazy.
It detoxifies you a lot and it just like cleans out your pores and that's why you feel like so refreshed. It boosts your
Yeah,
metabolism. So it's always great.
I love it. And something I also mentioned, I'm not a scientist or a researcher or therapist or anything like that. I'm just a 22-year-old girl who is going through anxiety and going through mental health struggles like all of you. And I think sometimes it's important to have people like that speak out. There's too many experts out there sharing their own personal, it's not their own personal stories. There's too many experts out there sharing their research and their data, which is great, but there's not enough people out there sharing their personal stories. So I'm upfront about the fact that I'm not an expert, but I don't think it's any less important than reading the data that's out there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. How has anxiety affected you? I mean, how has anxiety affected your relationships with friends, family, and for someone who is going through similar, what
Mhm.
advice can you give?
Ooh, I think at first it's really difficult when you're going through anxiety and you feel really alone and you might not necessarily want to share what you're going through. So it takes time. I would advise you to first look within yourself, get yourself a therapist if you have access to a therapist, and really work on self-reflection first and foremost. And once you get to the point where you're comfortable enough to share, it could really help talking to someone else and just getting your ideas out there in the open, having someone to listen to you. You might not necessarily want to write a whole book about it like I am, but I was super scared at first. I didn't tell anyone, but I slowly opened up, first to my parents, which was very scary, then to my best friend, and then to my significant other. But I think it's important to take your time to focus on self-reflection first, and also to be okay with the fact that not everyone is going to understand. Everyone's mental health struggles are different. I've had so many people hear about my OCD and just completely misunderstand, and it leads to me feeling worse and even more alone. And that's why I say you need to get to a place where you yourself are comfortable and confident in who you are, despite who your anxiety tries to tell you you are, prior to opening up to anyone about it.
Yeah, the key factor you mentioned, not everyone can even understand. Like, I could not even share it with everyone because for them, it would be like, this totally doesn't make any sense. How are you even
Right.
doing this? Like, and look at you, you're doing all this great things, and but yet you're going through all this craziness. I was like, yeah, it's possible. It's totally possible. It looks normal on outside, but inside you might be going through emotional turmoil that not everyone can even understand. And to share it with someone, they wouldn't even take it seriously because they would be like, oh, just it's fine. You will be fine. Oh no, you will not be. You actually need
Yeah.
to do something about this.
Some people are not going to understand. They're going to tell you the wrong thing, and it's okay. You have to get to a point where it's okay to kind of look at someone like that and say, oh, that sucks. That person doesn't really have a baseline mental health education. But how lucky am I that I do? And I know myself and I understand myself better than anyone else can. And eventually you will open up to someone who gets it, and it will be worth it.
That's a great point. Yeah. And also, like, as millennials, Gen Zs, we have this cultural expectations and also this narrative that, oh, as the millennials, Gen Z, do you think our social expectations contribute to the anxiety that our generation facing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're living in the age of social media where everything online is kind of glamorized, and we see all these celebrities with filtered photos, and that certainly does not help our mental health. We're dealing with our own issues and then seeing other people online and comparing ourselves to unrealistic standards can be so toxic. So I guess what I would say in that case is staying off the internet as much as you can. I sound a bit contradictory because I'm also a social media influencer and it's a big part of my life. But even I make time to unplug and separate myself from a lot of those unrealistic standards that we see online. And I think it's also pretty crucial to mention that mental health is still taboo. People are talking about their struggles, and you're hearing others make fun of them, misunderstand them. And that's why it's important to have more people speaking out. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but people who are genuinely going through these struggles and being open about it. That's what's going to make the change. It's not the data, it's not the experts, it's people actually coming forth and being brave and sharing their struggles, because only then will we start to take steps as a society to increase mental health education, to start talking about anxiety more in schools, to teach people what OCD is from a young age. I mean, I was in college and I had a physical science class. We had one day where we talked about mental health and OCD. We spent 5 minutes talking about it. It was one slide, and there was a like a Shutterstock photo of someone cleaning. And I just felt so misunderstood because OCD is not just about cleaning. It's not about keeping things in order. Some people, like me, have very debilitating, intrusive thoughts that they ruminate over. That is the OCD that people don't see. It is not cleaning. And it only takes people who are going through that other side of OCD, speaking out about it and teaching people to really make an impact and to change these patterns that we have set in society where we're only showing the cleaning and the organization and all that cookie cutter OCD stuff that we're used to seeing in the media.
Yeah, it's like they should pay way more attention because there are so many kids that committing suicide and like other issues they're going through that no one paying attention to and not recognizing the root cause of the problem. And when I was going through all the craziness, I thought it felt like hell. But after, when you go through all of this and you learn so much, then you totally feel different about others when they share the stories about mental health, and you totally understand the struggle and how big it's like mental health is huge right now because of social media. And I've been in social media for past 8 years. And when I was going through all this craziness with my mental health, I had to really definitely change my habits. Like now I actually take social media detox days when I don't even go on my phone, like my Instagram or any of that. And like I could care less. Yes, it's my main job, but still, like my health is a priority. So
Exactly.
health is wealth nowadays too. And yeah, and I started feeling better when I decreased my time. And also I used to be working like 12, 14 hours days and non-stop. And now I had to like completely change my schedule and completely be very strict on all the things I have to do because it really my mental health really depended on that. And I definitely started feeling better when I changed like the habits.
Yeah, 100%. And I applaud you for kind of finding that perfect balance because not a lot of people are able to do that. They're either so immersed in social media or, not in tune with anything that's going on in society right now.
I
And
learned it hard way, so I had to.
exactly. And you mentioned, suicide is one of the leading causes of death among people ages 18 to 24. Like, let that soak in. 18 to 24. These are basically still kids that have almost like not lived any life yet. These are people who still have so much life to live, yet they're taking their lives because they feel misunderstood due to mental health. And we are speaking out about mental health more. You see those hashtags, hashtag mental health matters. But what I question is, what are we really doing to take steps? There aren't classes in school taught about mental health. I think back to when I was in kindergarten and I was just taught about the emotions that you go through, happy, sad, scared, maybe lonely, but you don't really learn about anxiety. Like, where is anxiety? Where are these deeper emotions? We need to be primed a bit more so that when we turn 18 and we're starting to go through these emotions for the first time, we're not so scared and lonely and restless and all these awful emotions that come with anxiety. We need to learn about what anxiety is so that when it does come up, we're prepared to tackle it head on.
That's a great point. And so many young adults and kids and go through this and no one really believes them. No one takes it seriously. But if we do, it definitely can be life-changing. But for me, like I did not experience anxiety earlier on. Maybe I've had it, but it wasn't as bad. But
Yeah.
mine started later on, like late 20s. And that's when it hit me really bad. And that's why like I already kind of like, by that age you already fully kind of established. And as far as like experiencing that at that age is definitely new and it was out of nowhere. But
Yeah. And it's so new. That's the thing. By the time you're in your late 20s, you're
yeah,
already grown, you have your own life going on, a job, a career probably, and you shouldn't have to worry about illogical things like anxiety. And that's why I say tackling the problem as early as possible so that when it does arise, you're prepared for it is so key.
I guess when you yawn in like 18, 21, 22, you just like crazy. I mean, not actual way, but I'm saying like you don't think as much, you don't realize as much, but when you becoming wiser and a little bit older, you start realizing things and then you start looking at things differently. And that's when anxiety starts kicking in
I
more,
can
I guess.
totally see that. I was 18, so unfortunately I was pretty unlucky that it started early on in my adulting journey, but I was also in a unique situation, as I mentioned, class of 2020, middle of the pandemic. I was at home. I had my freshman year of college online. I was in a very unique situation, as were hundreds of thousands of people out there that are my age. And we need to treat it almost as a wake-up call. Like, knock on wood, we're not going to have another pandemic again, but it is a real thing that people are starting to experience anxiety early on, and we need to pay close attention to those signs so that they don't get worse and worse and worse until they're so debilitating that we have to face them.
Absolutely. What do you hope readers will take away from your book, especially those who are struggling with mental health?
I think the number one thing, and I mentioned it earlier, is relatability is so much more powerful than reassurance. I'm not trying to tell people why their anxiety is fake, why their intrusive thoughts aren't real. I'm just hoping that someone is going to read this, they're going to be able to relate, and they're going to feel less alone. I hope they get increased education about what anxiety is, what OCD is, because they are so painfully misunderstood. And honestly, to take that a step further, I hope people are empowered to own their anxiety and stop feeling less ashamed of it, and maybe even start to speak out one day. It could be something as simple as telling your best friend for the first time. Like I said, you don't have to write a book, you don't have to tell the masses, but the goal is to kind of reduce the shame and the guilt attached to anxiety. Because as it starts to become more normalized, that's when we're really going to start to make a change and it's going to become less taboo than it is now.
I love the point you mentioned shame and guilt because people are afraid to share because they are afraid to be misunderstood and judged by others, but we should normalize that because that's actually helpful when you share it with, loved ones, and that's when it actually can get help. I did not tell my mom at first, and she didn't really notice that. Of course, I live separately from my mom, but when I was talking to her, but then she started understanding that it's not okay. Like, we should do something about this. Like, you need to get help, you need to get it managed because it's not okay. Like, I don't like how you struggle, and you should not be struggling. And that's like, when you
Yeah,
want to actually help you, but you should share it anyway, no matter how you feel, because we should
Mhm.
not be afraid to be judged.
That's great that you were comfortable enough to tell her. And I think there's something to be said for people like us who have a following on social media, who look super successful on the outside, but are also struggling and who are being open about our struggles here today. I think there's something really empowering about someone who is listening to this and might think to themselves, oh, these people aren't, the social media influencers online who post those filtered photos and have these curated feeds. There's more to them than that. And it's nice to see that sometimes because maybe next time they look at social media and do their daily scroll, they don't stop to look at a photo for 20 minutes and ruminate over how perfect someone's body looks or how smooth their skin looks. Maybe they think twice and they're like, oh, I know social media is filtered. I'm not going to let myself get down on this today. I'm just going to keep scrolling.
And that took me time to realize it too. I never really compared myself to others, because I don't get jealous about people. I just
Mhm.
admire them because I always happy for others because I was like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it too. And it's just like they show me that it's possible. And I'm always happy for others, but other people get really jealous and they get really upset over it and they drive themselves crazy. And that's the worst part. And that's really like should be the huge reminder. Don't compare yourself to others on social media because we can't share all our life on social media. We share a part of it, but you don't know what we are actually going through behind the scenes. And like this year, I went through craziness And past year, it was like so much for me to go through that I'm like barely now getting myself together
Yeah.
because it was a huge emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
And we go through normal things like others do, but people online, when they look at our profiles, they don't realize it because they think our life is glamorous and it's just
Exactly. And
every
there's really
day.
no need to be insecure when
Yeah.
people look at social media influencers' profiles. We're all going through things. Some things are more intense than others, but us talking here today about our struggles so openly, I think is a step in the right direction. And it's showing people that anxiety is normal. It's not pleasant, but it is normal. And the more we talk about it and start to increase the education out there, then the better steps we'll be taking towards creating a more mental health conscious society. And then once that's achieved, then hopefully the suicide rates will go down. So it's all a domino effect, but it all starts with talking about our struggles and being open about what we're going through.
So true. And also, when people are going through mental health issues, they think it's the end of the world and they cannot, no one can help them. But this is not actually true. It can be done, it can be managed. You can totally get help and you can totally get out of this. You can totally feel normal. And like when I was going through that, I thought it's done. Like, I'm done. It's like, it's gonna be like this forever, you know? It was the worst. But when you get it under control, you learn all the coping mechanisms. Then you think, okay, I know this now. I'm fine.
Yep.
I can live my normal life because people think it's done. Like, you know,
Yeah. The goal is not to look for a finish line when it comes to anxiety and look for it to be done or for it to go away. I think the goal is to get to a place where you acknowledge your anxiety for what it is, you learn those coping mechanisms, as you mentioned, and you learn how to go forth and prosper despite your anxiety. It's not necessarily going to be gone, but you learn how to live with it, and you're a stronger and more emotionally rich individual because of it.
yeah, absolutely. And also now that your new book, Mindfire, is out in the world, what are your hopes for the book impact?
I hope that there's less shame and guilt attached to anxiety in the future. I hope that people reading this feel less alone and that they're empowered to hopefully start opening up about their struggles and feel less insecure about what they're going through because they're not the only one going through it.
That's a great point. And what do you think? How does community play a role in just combating with anxiety?
It takes a village. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not the only one going through it. So, like I said, once you feel comfortable enough to speak out to others about what you're going through, we can lift each other up and encourage each other to do great things despite our anxiety. So, don't be afraid to talk to someone, to relate to others, to share your story. It can be super empowering. You can lift each other up, hold each other's hand, and march forward and do great things and, not have to worry about the nonsense that's going on in the back of your head.
So true. And where can our listeners find you and where they can purchase the book?
You can order my book, Mindfire: Confessions of an Anxious 20-something by Carrie Berk on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble out now. And you can find me on social media at Carrie Berk on all platforms.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing your story. And I really loved our conversation, such an amazing conversation. Really love that you shared so many great tips and so much great advice. So I'm sure it will make a huge impact.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.